A man boards a plane, carrying nothing unusual. No weapons in sight, no signs of panic, just a briefcase and a plan no one could imagine. Within hours, he would commit one of the most mysterious crimes in history, extort $200,000 and then vanish into the night sky without a trace. No body, no identity, no answers, only a question. How do you disappear from the sky itself? It was November 24th, 1971. The kind of day that felt ordinary. Clouds stretched across the sky, heavy and slow. Rain moved quietly through the air, barely noticeable, but constant. Inside Northwest Orient Flight 305, there was nothing unusual. Passengers took their seats, flight attendants moved calmly through the aisle. The engines began their steady hum, a sound so familiar no one ever really listens to it. Except sometimes, something begins in the middle of ordinary moments, and no one notices until it's too late. He called himself Dan Cooper, a name that didn't exist in any meaningful way. Later, the world would know him as D.B. Cooper. He was described as calm, not just composed, but controlled. He ordered a drink, bourbon and soda. He smoked quietly, watching nothing in particular. There was no rush in his movements, no sign that anything unusual was about to happen. But sometimes the most dangerous people are not the loudest. They are the ones who already know exactly what they're going to do. When he handed the note to the flight attendant, it felt routine. A small piece of paper, folded. She almost didn't read it right away, but then he spoke, softly. You should look at that. Inside, a sentence that changed everything. I have a bomb. No exclamation, no urgency, just certainty. And when he opened the briefcase slightly, it wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. Wires, cylinders, enough to remove all doubt. What followed wasn't chaos. It was something far more unsettling. Control without effort. He didn't rush his words. He didn't repeat himself. Everything he said felt measured, almost rehearsed, as if this moment had already happened in his mind many times before. The flight attendant later described him as polite, respectful even, which made it worse, because there was no anger to react to, no instability to predict, just a man completely certain of what he was doing. There's something deeply unsettling about that kind of calm, because it forces a question. Was this desperation, or was it something else entirely? He didn't look like someone acting out of panic. He looked like someone executing a plan that required patience, precision, and a level of confidence that doesn't come easily. As the plane moved closer to Seattle, time seemed to slow down. Inside the cabin, everything continued as normal. Passengers unaware, some reading, some talking quietly, a few looking out the window, watching the rain slide across the glass. But just a few rows away, a completely different reality existed, one that only a handful of people were part of, and none of them could leave. When the plane finally landed, his demands were waiting. A bag filled with cash, $200,000. Not just any money, carefully prepared bills, recorded serial numbers, every detail documented. Because even then, the authorities were already thinking ahead, trying to prepare for a man they still didn't understand.
What's strange is what he didn't do. He didn't rush to grab the money. He didn't celebrate. He didn't lose control. He simply checked it, calmly, as if it were just another step in a process he had already accepted. And then, something even more unusual happened. He let the passengers go. Every single one of them. No unnecessary harm, no dramatic confrontation, just a quiet release, as if they had never been part of the plan at all. Now, only a small crew remained, and the real part of the story was about to begin.
As the plane took off again, the atmosphere changed completely. The cabin felt emptier, heavier. The sound of the engines no longer comforting, but distant. Outside, the storm had grown stronger, rain hitting harder, wind pushing against the aircraft. The kind of conditions most people would avoid entirely. But for him, this wasn't a problem. It was part of the plan. He began preparing slowly, adjusting the parachute, securing the money, checking every detail, again and again. Not because he was unsure, but because he understood what was at stake. There would be no second chance, no correction, only one moment to get everything right. At some point, he asked the crew to move forward, to stay out of his way. They obeyed, because by then there was nothing left to negotiate, nothing left to say, only the sound of the wind growing louder.
The moment he disappeared into the night, the search began. Not hours later, not the next day, immediately. Authorities didn't just assume he was gone. They believed he might still be out there, somewhere below, waiting. Planes were sent into the sky. Search teams moved across the ground. Forests were scanned. Rivers were checked. Mountains were explored. But the terrain was unforgiving, cold, wet, endless, and the conditions that night made everything worse. Heavy rain, strong winds, near total darkness. Even experienced parachutists would hesitate under those conditions. So the question began to grow, was this even survivable? The FBI began building a profile. Who was this man? He knew how to remain calm. He understood aircraft behavior. He chose his moment carefully. This wasn't random. It suggested preparation, possibly military background, possibly aviation knowledge. But every theory led nowhere. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And slowly, the case began to change. Not because it was solved, but because it wasn't. Hundreds of suspects were investigated. Men with similar backgrounds, similar appearances. Some seemed convincing. For a moment, it felt like the mystery was over. But every time, something didn't match. A detail off, a timeline that didn't fit, and the case would collapse again.
Then, years later, something unexpected happened. A young boy was playing near the banks of a river, digging in the sand, when he found something strange. Bundles of cash, worn down, partially buried, but still there, still real. The serial numbers matched. It was the ransom money, a piece of the story, returning to the surface. But the discovery only created more questions. How did it get there? Why only a small portion? What happened to the rest? Was it lost during the jump? Or placed there intentionally?
Some believe the answer is simple. He didn't survive. The conditions were too extreme, the fall too dangerous, the terrain too unforgiving. They believe that somewhere, hidden by time and nature, his body still lies undiscovered. But others see it differently. They believe he knew exactly what he was doing, that he studied the area, understood the risks, and chose that moment carefully. not randomly, but strategically. And then there's the theory that refuses to disappear, that he survived. And not only that he escaped completely, started over, changed his identity, and lived the rest of his life as someone else.
That idea is what keeps this story alive, because it challenges something fundamental, the belief that every story has an ending, that every mystery can be solved. But sometimes there is no answer, no final piece, no moment of closure, just silence.
A man jumped into the night, and the world never caught up with him.
For decades, there has been no answer, no confirmed identity, no final trace, just fragments of a story that never fully came together. And maybe that's why this case still feels different, because it leaves something unresolved, not just in the investigation, but in us. We're used to answers, to endings, to knowing how things finish, but this story refuses to do that.
A man walked into a system, understood it, used it, and then stepped outside of it. Completely. No explanation, no goodbye, just disappearance.
And somewhere in that idea, there's something unsettling. The possibility that someone could plan everything so precisely that even after decades, the world still doesn't know what really happened.
Imagine that moment one last time. The door open, the wind rushing in, the darkness below, and a man standing at the edge, ready to leave everything behind.
And then he stepped forward and became a mystery that time still hasn't solved.
This is For Real.